ですにいろいろと説明してもらおうと思います。ちょっと本人の経歴、それから、エドラダワー蒸留所の、説明なんかをちょっと細かく聞いてみたいと思います。まず、ウェアハウスには樽が何樽ありますか？
Yes. We currently have about 5,800 casks in the warehouse. As you saw from the pictures earlier on, the warehouse is not quite yet full. We would expect ultimately to have about 10,000 casks. Of the 5,600 that we have presently, about 4,400 are Edradar or Belekin. Thank you.
年間製造本数というか、リットルというか、それを説明していただけたら。
At Edradar, we produce currently 120,000 litres a year, and that's because we started producing 6 days per week from March of 2011, equivalent to 350,000 litres, 350,000 bottles per annum of the 10-year-old at 40%. Thank you.
続きまして、輸出のベスト5、日本の数字が分かったら。
The 5 best export markets for Edradar would be France, Germany, Holland, the USA, and Japan would also be in the top 5. Thank you.
このモルトをメインモルトとして使っているブレンドがあれば、
Edradar is no longer used in blended whiskies. That stopped in 2002 when Edradar was taken over by Signatory Vintage. Now all of our inventory is held for single malt bottlings. However, Edradar owes its survival to King's Ransom and House of Lords blends, which featured Edradar very prominently. Thank you.
モルトスターを使っていますか？PPM どのくらいかな？
Yes, we use professional maltsters, Baird's in Inverness primarily, and they supply the malt to us in 1-ton bags. We're currently milling about 1.15 tons for each day's mash. The Edradar is unpeated, however, Belekin, which is the heavily peated Edradar expression, this will be peated to 58 ppm.
樽の種類を、何種類ぐらいか、あと何回ぐらい使ってますかっていうのを説明してください。
Yes. For the main Edradar expressions, we use Oloroso sherry casks. This one, for example, has been finished in Oloroso sherry casks for 5 years. And this one is a combination of bourbon matured Edradar and sherry casks. Over time, the sherry influence in both bottlings will increase because of the wood policy that we have recently introduced. Sherry casks we will only use twice, along with wine casks. And for bourbon barrels, we will only use them once. This is the heavily peated Belekin, which was fully matured in first full bourbon barrels. We like to think that our wood policy at Edradar is probably the most expensive of any of the distilleries because of the number of first fill sherry casks in particular that are being used to mature our whiskey. Over 50% of the Edradar is in first fill sherry. We have many different styles of wine cask that are used for maturation. This particular expression has been matured in Burgundy casks, whereas this one has been finished in Muscatel. This one has been finished in a port cask.
このモルトの性格、要するにエドラダワーの、性格、それから他の蒸留所、他のディスティラリーのと異なる点。
Yes. The character of Edradar from the stills, the small stills produce a heavier, oilier style of spirit than many other distilleries. In contrast, for example, to Glenmorangie, which has the tallest stills in Scotland and producing a very light character. The heavy oily style is further influenced by the extent of sherry that we use, the sherry cask for maturation. And that would be the main point of difference with the other distilleries, the fact that we're using a lot of first fill sherry casks and an extensive use of wine casks for single cask or small batch bottlings.
デス自身がよく飲むウイスキー。
The whiskey which I would drink most regularly probably is the 12-year-old Edredar, which is a very strong sherry influence and slightly stronger, being unchill filtered and bottled at 46%.
ですのね、今までで最高のウイスキー聞いてみたいな。
I have been fortunate to taste very many fine whiskies over the 20 to 30 years that I've been involved in the industry. This one is certainly my favourite Edredar, the port finish. This is in fact our last cask from 1983, sadly, and it's a beautiful whiskey that has been finished in a port cask for I think 8 years.
デス自身のウイスキー業界での経歴を聞いてみましょう。
I had a very fortunate introduction to Scotch whisky. I came to Scotland from Australia and worked for an auditing firm called Price Waterhouse. And the first job I was given, I was sent to Speyside for 2 weeks to do the audit of the Glenlivet and Glen Grant Distillery Company. So I was up in Speyside for 2 weeks at somebody's expense, visiting Glenlivet, Glen Grant, Longbourn, Benriach and Caperdonic distilleries. I then joined Diageo in 1989 and worked on consolidating all of their production, particularly in the bottling halls, and left in 1996. I rejoined the whisky industry in 2002 when Andrew Symington, who owned Signatory, and I knew quite well, was interested in buying Edredar from Pernod Ricard. I helped Andrew put the business plan together, helped him with the negotiations and in raising the money from the bank in order to allow Signatory to buy Edredar. Unfortunately, that deal was completed in July 2002, and I've been involved with Edredar ever since. It's been great fun.